This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast about all things innovation in the people space. I'm Kyle Rode. Let's start the show. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. Super excited for the guest today. This is one of those situations where I wish I would have hit record like 5 minutes ago, but we're going to do our best to reenact that. With us, we have Jim D'Amico. He is the Director of Talent Acquisition at Holland America Group. We're going to be talking about talent acquisition, innovation, and a little bit of stand-up comedy. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Happy to be here.
Well, we're chuckling because we were just having a great conversation here, and I would like to give you an opportunity to maybe give yourself a little bit of an introduction to our audience about your background and ultimately how you ended up as the Director of Talent Acquisition for Holland America.
Sure, absolutely. So the quick snapshot is my background is built on just numerous failures. So and learning and building on those. But essentially I've been in the talent acquisition space for almost 30 years now. I love it to death. I wound up at Holland America in a very non-direct route. I actually had a friend that was working there that asked me to do a consult for them. I was working for another company at the time, which I loved the team, loved the people. And I met the folks at Holland America, and it's a fantastic team. It's a really great organization. And, it just felt like such a good fit. Oh, and by the way, unlimited free cruises. So it was a good decision.
That's a good perk. I can't offer that to my employees. Like, hey, we don't have that.
Exactly. It's the best perk I've ever had.
There you go. There's a subset of like a business opportunity there for all those cruise lines out there. Hey, let's make this an employee benefit.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. So, I'm really excited for the conversation today because you have spent, a large part of your career really digging into talent acquisition and really focusing on innovation in the space. So, I'm curious what sparked that interest in innovation and doing things differently or finding new ways to do things.
So I think it's a combination of two things. I've always been very intellectually curious, which please don't confuse that with intelligence. Just means I ask a lot of questions. And secondly, I'm inherently lazy. So basically figured there were better ways to do things. I just had to figure them out. So when I started in TA, Kyle, I started in third-party recruiting, right? The old boiler room recruiting. And you realize real quick, there has to be a better way to do this. And
Sure.
So, just really talking to people, learning what they're doing, and then building on that knowledge to do things different and better. And my focus has always been on, how do we manage effort through efficiency? And I think that's the key question I always have to ask.
So I love that answer. And so my background, I grew up in retail and manufacturing, and we're always talking about lean, right? And we're talking about continuous improvement. And I've always thought about this like, yeah, this is great for lazy people, right? Like, it's all about working less hard. And it's the flip side of that is we say we're working more productively, but the reality is we're all just trying to work less hard or i.e. lazy. So I love that. It's like innovation is the lazy man's dream, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We're getting a little bit of a background for those that aren't aware. Jim cut his teeth in stand-up comedy. So, there's an inherent jokester across from the microphone as well. So thanks for bringing that out, Jim. Appreciate it.
No worries. And that's failure number 6, by the way.
Number 6. All right.
That was failure number 6 of my career in stand-up.
You know what? Is it a failure though? I mean, I guarantee you that you have some really awesome stories that most of us do not have.
So, look, it is a failure. I'm not on SNL. I'm not hosting a late night talk show. I'm not in the movies. But I mean, from that standpoint, yes. But what I learned, and again, that's the key with any failure. It's what you learn and how you apply it that really means things. And the great comedians make it look so easy, but you get a real respect when you learn what goes into it and what's behind it and how hard it really truly is. So I would not trade any of my experiences that I've had, no matter how much of a crash and burn they were.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think what's fascinating about this discussion and your approach is, the reality is we've all had failures, right? Yeah, you're just able to admit it. But I also think that's inherent in all great innovators as well, right? Is the fact that, it took X number of tries before you actually got something correct. And the difference between giving up on that one that you got correct versus the 99 you got incorrect, made all the difference, right? And so I think it's a testament to all the great innovators out there. So as you look at the challenges facing us in talent acquisition, first of all, I would agree, ripe for innovation. It is one of those areas that, I still think has a significantly long way to go. So as you look at your space, and there's also a side note, you've been named the last 3 years a talent innovator for 2020, 2021, 2022. Obviously, you're doing something innovative in the space. Where are you seeing the biggest opportunity to make the biggest ripple, and how are you kind of focusing your energy on that right now?
So great question. So I think it comes to that we've had to transition how talent acquisition operates. And what I mean by that is, 10 years ago, and we changed slowly. So 10 years ago is like 6 months in TA time. But 10 years ago, you could focus on attraction, talent attraction, right? Which means flashy ads, flashy postings, whatever, and get people motivated. Well, we have 1.6 million more jobs than we have people now. So attraction isn't where we're at. So I tell people all the time, we're in a post-attraction world. We are now focused on talent seduction, right? Which is a longer process. It's more involved. But when I look at when that realization came to me, that the difference between attraction and seduction, what really realized to me, so how does seduction work? And like all things that humans do, and this goes back to comedy, this goes to everything, it all comes down to storytelling. So that was when I won that award. The first big push we made in innovation was around how we approach storytelling. So I'm a recruiter by trade, right? And so my team, we were talking about that and said, we need to do a better job telling stories and focus on stories that are constructed properly, that are legit stories, right? You don't want to tell fibs, and that in some way we can serialize, because we have to build these relationships with candidates. And we discussed before the call. So I trained for 5 years at Second City, but again, I'm a failed comedian. So I didn't think I was the best person to build that, but I'm a recruiter. So I sourced a screenwriter that had worked on a couple of shows that my recruiters really liked, which were Walking Dead and House of Cards. And I cold called her and said, hey, would you be interested in helping me build a storytelling class and course for my team that was foundational? So my team was really one of the first ones to really focus on structured storytelling as part of the talent acquisition process. First person stories, all very honest, coupled with a diagnostic interviewing process where we were not telling stories at first. We're asking people where it hurts and then using stories to show the cure. And that really changed the game for us. So that was a big impetus for innovation for us. And I'm sorry, that was probably 10 minutes too long.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay. So I just want to back up for a minute. So Jim wants to build a course. What does Jim do? He cold calls somebody that's a screenwriter for like House of Cards, Walking Dead, and just says, hey, can we build a course on telling stories? So, okay, I'm cool. I'm hooked. So So, so, so as you're building out this protocol and thinking about this, the power of the story. And I love the comment, changing it from attraction to seduction. Which I guarantee you there's a lot of jokes in there. But I am not a Second City comedian, so I'm not even going to try. I'm sure you can probably think of some. But as you're building out this course and as you're thinking about telling this story in the context of recruiting, what did the professional screenwriters focus on? Like how did they approach this problem and help kind of ready your team for telling these stories?
Sure. So first there's the technical portion, right? Like, so stories have a structure, and it's basically the 3-act structure, right? You have an act 1 that is an introduction, sets the stage. Act 2 is a challenge. Act 3 is the resolution. And then you have 7 story archetypes that you can build around. And those are things like Hero's Quest, Voyager Return, Rise from the Ashes. So you have these different archetypes. So understanding that structure, understanding that for stories to be powerful, they have to be first person, right? When you're telling a story like this happened to a friend of a friend, people lose interest. But when you tell it from the first person, it's realistic. And then also, we really wanted stories that were what we called snackable, right? So we're talking, these are 90-second stories. So you have 30 seconds per act, essentially, plus or minus a couple. And then, so then the other thing we had to work on was, so that's the structure, build the stories. Then we had to constantly work on how we rehearse those stories. You don't want them to sound scripted. You don't want them to meander. You don't want to have a ton of ums. You want them to sound very good. So, we built our stories, and most people built them out like around bullet points. And then we practiced them with each other over and over and over again, which is what you'd see comedians do. So if you're ever at a comedy club, look through the window after it closed, there's a bunch of comedians sitting around drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, telling each other jokes, just really trying to practice making it sound natural and great delivery. And so we did the same thing.
Did anybody do like the Seinfeld voice? Because I feel like that would really that's it.
No, but that would have been beautiful. That would have been so beautiful.
That'd be good. Yeah, I'm totally gonna. So I think it's, what's fascinating about this conversation. I've never thought about this before. Okay, so first of all, so congratulations. Like, this is like the 200th episode, and we've talked about the power of stories. We've talked about the power of humor, but we haven't really talked about like how everything fits together, especially from the context of how do you apply this to the talent acquisition process, right? But I think, what you're getting at here, what's really powerful from my standpoint as I hear this is like, we're tapping into people's humanity, right? You're tapping into the things that entertain them and get them excited and get them motivated and tap into something that's at the core of human beings, which is like, we want to hear these stories. Like, this is how we have shared communication for thousands and thousands of years. So why wouldn't we use this thing that we're like biologically, naturally inclined to gravitate towards and put it in the context of getting people to want to work for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, 100%. 100%.
It makes perfect sense. Okay. So I'm sold on that. So I got to go figure out which show I want, I don't know. I've been watching too much Key and Peele. That's probably not HR appropriate, but I think they're probably way too busy. But
great storytellers, right? They tell a story very consistent. In an episode, they'll tell several different stories, and they're great. I love Key and Peele too.
Me too. So here's what's fun. Okay, this is maybe tangential, but like so I was watching Key and Peele, like old school, like episode 1, like season 1, whatever. And I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the same voice that all of Jordan Peele's movies are in now.
Yes.
Some of those sketches. And it like, for me, it was like a powerful, like, oh, I can see like the paintbrushes from the artist.
Yes.
Right. And so I actually do have a question here. So I that was kind of an interesting like aha moment here. It was actually this weekend. I'm curious how you take these stories. How do you put that kind of that artist's brush on them so that they tie that person back to either the recruiter or the hiring manager or the organization? How do you make this so that this is personable and that it is almost that like artistic expression for the folks that are telling these stories?
So two things there. So first off, everybody has their own voice. So never try to apply your voice to someone else, right? Let them find their own voice. That's really important because if not, they're going to stumble. It's going to sound artificial. But also, it's knowing what story to tell at the right point. So I alluded earlier to something called diagnostic interviewing, right? So when we're talking to somebody's not talking to us because they want a job. They're talking to us because they think we can solve a problem they have, right? Might be they don't like their manager. They don't have a chance for advancement. They want to be in a different location. There's a million different things that could be that pain point. So we have to take the time to do that diagnosis and say, what is that pain point? And then make sure that the story that we tell them applies to how we would see that being a cure, giving them an example of how we've cured that before or how it was cured for us. But it's lining up the right story. So we hear all the time, selling and telling are not the same things. So when we're telling a story, we're really selling a story, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So we have had this dialogue with on the other side of the spectrum where we talk about like, okay, when you are creating a job description, what is the problem that you're trying to solve for the organization? Right. But honestly, it's kind of selfish, right? It's like, well, what do we want? Right.
Yes.
I think it's a lot more rare where you'll find an organization that actually does what you described, which is go try to figure out what their problem is. What is the candidate's problem that they're trying to solve? And then, my gosh, what if you get those two things aligned, right? Like hey, my job is done here. I can go home now.
Exactly. And that's why, like, when it comes to jobs, and when it comes to candidates, like, what is the wrong question in my mind? I think we have to start with why. So when we talk about a job, why does a job exist? Not why is it open, right? It's probably open because somebody left or we're expanding. But why does the job exist? Is it there to make money? Is it there to save money? Is it there to improve a process? Because as a candidate, that's what I really want to know is why do you need me? And for candidates, it's the same thing. It's not so much about what they can do. We have to start with, why are you looking? What is that pain point that you want help solving? It's a much more human way to look at things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to the intellectual curiosity that you mentioned earlier, right? And the fact that you're not just assuming that, well, so-and-so quit. Okay. Where's the job description? Well, when did we update it? 4.5 years ago. Good enough. It's still got our logo on it. So go ahead.
That's right.
It's like, I mean, and I guarantee you, so our listeners right now, I guarantee you they're like, oh yeah. Oh, that, yeah. Oh, they're chuckling because they know, yeah, we all do this. We all do this all the like if anybody says, oh, I've never done that, you're full of shit. Come on. Oh yeah. Because it's easy. It's easier to just say, okay, here's the job description, post it, hit send, and just wait for the applications to flow in, right? But my guess is your opinion is that might not be the best way to do it.
It's not, right? So look, we all want to take that path of least resistance, right? Again, let's get back to, we inherently as humans love stories. We inherently are lazy. So, but when we have to do things that go past that lazy, I think where TA fails, and this is often true in the larger HR context of how we communicate with our constituents, is we never really tell them what's in it for them. No hiring manager is looking forward to doing an intake because they think it's just going to be sitting on the phone with the recruiter, giving them keywords, telling them where to look, going over the experience. But when we say, look, if we take the time and we really dig into the why and we get some of this other information, what's in it for you is going to be quicker access to better candidates that are more engaged, So, qualified, interested, and available becomes much quicker for you. And the people that you talk to are going to come somewhat pre-connected to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So earlier in my career, I didn't get it. I was in the same, I was just like, why do we have to do all this? Like this, we've already looked at this job description so many times. What more can we do to it? And the reality is, the more work you do up front, the more clear you are, the more, not just on what the job needs to be, but being really honest about what are the actual skills that we need. What
Yes.
do we need somebody from the industry or not? And then having the opportunity to have a candidate come in that is warm and like already warmed up. Like we'll go back to it's like the stand-up comedian that has the warm-up act, right? Like
Yes.
nobody wants to see the magician, but the magician makes the comedian look that much better, right?
Absolutely.
I hope, you know what, Jim? I'm really sorry if magician was one of the like 6 failures before comedy.
Oh, not nearly talented. I have a good friend that's a magician, not nearly talented enough.
I love, if there's any magicians listening to this, I love you all. We're equal opportunity, magicians included. That's a protected class under the EEOC.
That's right.
See now you got me going, and now everybody's realizing Kyle is so bad at comedy. Leave the jokes to Jim. That's what's happening.
You're doing great, guy.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You know what? Just keep feeding my ego. It's gonna be better for me. So I think one of the things that's been interesting about this conversation, and I'm curious to get your perspective on it, is the other thing that I have found, and you are no exception, is that when you talk to people who are good storytellers and who take the time to actually kind of build this level of connection, you start to actually build a relationship, and you start to kind of understand, okay, who am I talking to on a level that's deeper than a transaction, right? And so it is part of your goal as a talent acquisition leader to get your team to build these levels of connection more rapidly. Is that part of the benefit of the storytelling approach as well?
Absolutely, right? So it's a competitive marketplace. So the relationships matter, and people will make decisions based on where they feel strong relationship versus where it's been very transactional. And storytelling is a great way to make those connections because the stories and the archetypes are universal. We all have a relationship to those. And when you layer in, like if you're doing, anything where it's comedy or it's humor, people don't realize all comedy comes from only 2 places, and that's truth and pain. And to open yourself up to share your pain or share your truth, you are making connections with people. People respond to that because it's honest. And we like that. We want to have those honest relationships.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And this as being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Yeah, the vulnerability thing is really interesting. And I like, if I look around the world and I look at all the professions where people really suck at being vulnerable, HR is one of the top in my mind, where like we're supposed to be like these like stoic but empathetic, but not too empathetic, because then you're like, being too friendly with, like, it's like this weird dichotomy of what you're supposed to be as an HR professional. I think we're having a little bit of a a crisis moment, and you look at like burnout levels and like people like they don't feel like they can be themselves at work. And so what advice would you give to us who are maybe struggling with this honesty, the truth and pain and vulnerability that actually helps facilitate some of these connections? But those professionals that are really struggling with that because maybe they've gotten mixed messages or just aren't comfortable with it yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from not being comfortable with it. So, it's something you can't just jump all in on right away. I think you start with sort of think of yourself as a book, start with the preface and, chapter 1. So open yourself up slowly and be vulnerable. But I think it's important that you don't be afraid to show that vulnerability. Great leaders admit mistakes. That's a key act of vulnerability. I always tell people I was helping a young fellow who wants to get into comedy not too long ago. And I'm like, here's the deal. The butt of your joke is always you, right? It's not anyone else. You have to be the butt of your own jokes. And so being comfortable in doing that, because it doesn't, I don't know, we get this feeling that it takes away from who you are, but it really doesn't. And look, I've been in some masculine fields. I was in the Army for many years, and you can still joke, right? It's doesn't make you less of a soldier or a warrior or whatever you want to call yourself because you have a sense of humor. So being open to it, knowing that again, nothing's perfect. You may get some bad reactions, or your boss may say, "Why are you being that way?" But look, humans need to be human. I think that's the bottom line.
I couldn't agree more. I think it is. I think it's one of the more important things is that we recognize when we're being inauthentic, and that we're honest with ourselves when we're doing that. And I think I've had this conversation with a number of professionals, and some poignant conversations with professionals who feel like I'm not allowed to be myself, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
I literally walk into work and I have to put on like this mask or this like completely different facade, and then I'm reprimanded when I am myself. And so and at a certain point it's kind of like, okay, well, that sucks, maybe you shouldn't go there anymore, you know what I mean? Like I do think that some of
Yes.
it's just like we can choose not to be in those situations. But I also I'm curious, maybe shifting gears a little bit, because I want to ask this question, and maybe you're sick of these types of questions.
No.
I feel like we can't talk about talent acquisition without talking about AI, right? Because it's the new the hottest topic. I think there's like 7,500 new podcasts with AI in the title. I started 3 of them just to see, and they've already eclipsed the downloads, right? But the reality is, I do think that AI will be a little bit disruptive. But what we're talking about is humanity and connection and stories. And I'm curious how you see AI and all of these like AI screening tools and like Chat GPT and all these kind of like what you could call story writing or storytelling tool. How do you see this playing in to this challenge of telling stories, being a seductive employer, and building that human connection, that relationship, without having a human?
So I think, AI is going to continue to change our lives. It's going to be an evolution. But I think where AI really impacts right now is actually freeing recruiters and sourcers and people in TA from the transactional pieces that can be managed by that computer or by that, machine learning. And what then gives us more time to focus on relationships. So I think that's the biggest strength. Now, products like ChatGTP, I love ChatGTP because when you're writing stories, this is my experience is people tend to be too wordy, right? We put too many words in. ChatGTP is a great editor. Like it really helps me distill a story down in a way that used to take me hours and hours and iterations to do. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah. I think it's like you can't just take it and copy paste, right? But it's a good, it helps fill in the blank space that would be very frustrating and annoying.
Yes.
I haven't given it one of my transcripts. I don't want to know how many ands and ums it cuts out, but I'm not myself through that. But yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think you said it perfectly. It's like you still have to do the relationship piece. You still have to make the human connections, and you still have to be the representative of the organization, and you still have to give realistic job views and honest perceptions of what it's like to work there and tell your personal story. But that doesn't mean that you have to do all of the transactional administration behind the scenes anymore, right? So
Absolutely.
couldn't agree more. All right. Well, I got my obligatory AI question in for the day, so thank you.
Excellent.
All right. We are going to shift gears. We're going to go into the Rebel HR Flash round. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Here we go. Where does HR need to rebel?
So let's go back to what we're talking about. HR needs to rebel and be more human. Do not let the business tell you that you are an automaton, that you are a machine that fills a function. You be the humans that help the other humans.
Be the humans. It's actually in the job title. It really,
Exactly.
Typically, unless you're one of those new school like people leaders or something like that, people operations or whatever the newest title is.
Yes.
All right. Question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
All right. I'll give you several folks. So with the topic of humanity, my good friend Craig Fisher, who runs the Talent Net Live conference, just wrote a book called Hiring Human, which is a fantastic piece of, what we're talking about right now. From a TA perspective, I also love Tim Sackett's voice. He's been around the block a lot. And then from a storytelling standpoint, one of my really person I enjoy a lot learning about how we tell stories in a way to engage candidates is Jody Ordeoni at Brandemics. I think those 3 are all incredible.
Awesome. I don't know 2 of them, but we actually literally just had Tim on the podcast, Tim Sackett. So check that one out. We talked a lot about tech on that one. So if you we
just did the Michigan Recruiters Conference. He and I started that years ago, and I was just up there last week.
Nice.
Doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Great boy. So appreciate you sharing that. Last question. How can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
Well, because I'm in TA, LinkedIn, of course, is we're all living on LinkedIn. But, if people are on LinkedIn, you can always email me at jdemico@hollandamericagroup.com. I'm happy to connect and speak with people anytime.
There you go. And if you're looking for a career change and you want to go into the industry, they have great perks.
That's right.
I'll give you one little plug. We usually don't sell things on the podcast, but I'll give you a plug for the the benefit, the most unique benefit you can have. Jim, it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for spending the last few minutes with us and sharing some really powerful information. We'll have all your information in the show notes. Check it out, and appreciate you being a voice out there for adding some humanity back into talent acquisition.
Thank you, Kyle. My pleasure.
All right, that does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.